So keeping it relevant to what we're doing on a day in, day out basis, we just wanted to profile some of these recent tests that we've done with people. We hit you with the toxic metal one, we showed you the SIBO breath test. There's one that we used to use a lot when we first started testing about 5-6 years ago. We got away from a little bit, but it's one that's always in the stable, and some patients come in actually asking for this, or having measured some markers that were on this in the past, wanting to go this route. It's the ASI, Adrenal Salivary Index test, and it is what it sounds like, saliva samples. So again, a convenient one. A patient takes it home, submits saliva samples throughout the day, sends it in. We get a variety of markers, not just the cortisol, that hormone output from the adrenal gland, but we get a variety of markers on there. Some patients want to see that. They've had blood drawn of cortisol in the past, they've measured through urine, and they want to see the saliva, or they've had it done in the past and they're just curious about it. It can be useful. It can be useful depending on what you find. If you get a result like this, as you see my notes already are all over this puppy to discuss with the patient, but it graphs your cortisol release throughout the day. And as we talked on in the past, that should be high in the morning and then slowly dip down to send you into bed at night, because there's an inverse relationship with cortisol and melatonin. We want cortisol high in the morning, we want melatonin low in the morning, we want those puppies to flip-flop as it goes to bedtime so you can sleep better. We've seen patients with flatlined levels of cortisol, meaning they are overstressed and those adrenals are overstressed from toxic stressors, mental stressors, physical stressors, and they need help right there. And we've seen patients with a flip-flop pattern where the cortisol is peaked at night and the cortisol is at low levels in the morning. Obviously, this will be that person with that totally flipped on its head circadian rhythm and maybe some sleep disorders there. So you can cue in on that and see what's going on that level. There's some other markers that you see on as well on here that people find useful. DHEA. DHEA, if you've ever heard that one. That's involved in that cortisol pathway, that adrenal, that hormonal pathway, I should say. And that can start to dip. That can start to dip if you're in a state of chronic stress, and the DHEA can start to go down, go down, go down. We need DHEA for things like mental fitness, for endurance levels. So you start to see some fatigue when that starts to lack. Inability to lose weight, inability to put on muscle mass, inability to recover after a workout or recover from injury. All that stuff for DHEA. DHEA goes further down the line and leads to the production of testosterone, estrogen. So if that starts to go down, it could be a warning that your reproductive hormones are starting to dip as well. Why is that included on this test? Because stress. Stress will divert all to the adrenal glands, start spiking the cortisol, start going down the stress pathway at the expense of DHA to your sex hormones, your reproductive hormones. So that's another reason that they put that marker on here. A few other markers they put on here is insulin. Insulin, fasting and non-fasting. Another useful one to have. Why is it included? Because insulin is the antithesis to cortisol. When your body releases cortisol due to the stress response to your adrenal glands, your body then excretes and releases insulin to counter that, the effects of the cortisol. So that might be elevated as well. We always want to know that because insulin dysregulation is involved in so many maladies in the body and obviously the precursor to diabetes. So we want to know that as well. It also tests something called SIG-A. We talked about SIG-A when we started talking about immune function in the past. We started talking about your first line of defense and how we could potentially guard against encountering that pathogen, that virus that might be lurking, or the bacteria, whatever it is. SIG-A is our first line of defense, and it's on all the mucosal linings in our body. That's our respiratory tract, that's our mouth, that's our GI tract. We need SIG-A up. This measures that as well. Why do they include it? Because again, why does stress matter? If your cortisol is up and your cortisol is elevated all the time due to chronic stressors and unmitigated, no break from that, SIG-A usually tends to dip, and now you have a compromised immune system, especially your first line of defense, leaving you more susceptible to getting sick. So we get a look at that on there too. They also show on here too, which is nice to see, they show gliadin, gluten antibodies on here, a measure through the saliva. None of these are the end-all be-all, but they throw all these on there for this test, and it's a relatively affordable test. Like I said, I've gravitated a little bit away from using this puppy as much, but some patients come in and we always discuss all the options, testing and otherwise, the pros and the cons to doing it. Some people want to do it. There's reasons for it. We have no problem sending them home with a kit. We get the results back and we can act off some of the results, or like we said, move on with peace of mind. We checked that already. Let's move on to the next one and take it from there. So there you go, Adrenal Salivary Index, another test that you have in your resources if need be, another thing to look at. Move on, enhance your health, enhance your life.